And are vacant homes, is this the problem? This is what we were discussing. And you'll hear this sometimes. I mean, I heard it. I remember when I was in Vancouver, British Columbia, about 3 years ago, the locals there were really upset because um, foreigners from Hong Kong, when Hong Kong was, was really being taken over by the Xi regime, and a lot of their freedoms were lost. Free speech was crushed in Hong Kong. A lot of those folks in Hong Kong moved to British Columbia, or they purchased property in British Columbia as an investment or as a potential landing spot for them to move to when they feel like they need to leave Hong Kong. Well, in Vancouver, there are a lot of high-rise apartment buildings and condos, and a lot of those units were empty. And people there were just furious. They're saying, we've got all these empty, vacant places, but no one's using them. And then that's restricting the supply of available property. And that's jacking up our prices. And this ain't right. And they wanted to increase, and I think they did in Vancouver, they increased property taxes and a number of other fees that if you have something that's just sitting vacant, well, we're going to hit you hard on that. They already pay property tax on vacant property, but they were going to increase those taxes to penalize them for not living in the property or renting it out to someone else. And now I think there's a lot of people in California that are saying the same thing. There's too many rich people that have a second home, a vacation home. It's just sitting there. I've heard people say, we don't really have a homelessness crisis. There are 16 million vacant homes all around the United States, and yet the homelessness crisis is only about 500,000. So there's plenty of places that we can put them. But you sure about that? I mean, first of all, when you're talking about vacant homes, it's different in San Diego than it is throughout the rest of the country. I mean, you go to the Rust Belt in Ohio and in Indiana and Michigan, or go down to downtown Detroit. Oh my God, there's a ton of vacant property that are boarded up. They're dilapidated. They're not livable, or if they are livable, they're just a terrible piece of property. They probably needs to be blown up and rebuilt. There's a lot of that. And then also, generally speaking, a lot of these so-called vacant properties are just simply homes that are in between tenants. Maybe it's a place that went up for sale and the person moved out and they've already moved into their new place and it just happens to be empty, like the picture on my screen here. Or in other cases, vacant property because they're doing a remodel and, there's a period of time where there's no tenant for 6 months, 9 months while they're, redoing the kitchen or doing an expansion or what have you. There's a lot of cases like that. But in San Diego County, is this really a problem? Now, there are cases of so-called rich people that have a vacation home at La Jolla Shores that they only use part of the year, and the rest of the year it's empty. Those do exist. There are other cases where people have vacation rental property that they use part of the time. They'll rent it out part of the time, or it'll be vacant part of the time. And, that's the whole Airbnb thing. And people get upset about that. We don't want more Airbnb. We don't want all these, tourists coming in and having raves and parties in these places. And you see more of that definitely in the beach area, in Mission Beach, where there's vacation rentals right there along the boardwalk or along Mission Bay. And by the way, my family rented one of those for a stay vacation about 10 years ago. It was great. We're right on the boardwalk. What a neat way to celebrate San Diego and vacation here. But in San Diego County, what do you think is the percentage of homes that are vacant and that are literally like no one's in there? I mean, it's perfectly fine, but there's no tenant, there's no one living in there, and yet they're not doing a remodel. It's just kind of sitting there. Well, the San Diego Housing Commission did a study, and in the city of San Diego, less than 1% of housing units in San Diego are vacant long-term. And they define vacant as being vacant for at least six consecutive months at some point during a 5-year period before the COVID-19 pandemic. So these are cases, literally a perfectly good place to live. And for at least 6 months of the year, no one's living there. Maybe they live half time, in Minnesota, and then they they're snowbirds and they come to San Diego during the winter months. Those are those some of those examples. Or maybe they're just really rich, and they have a house in Malibu and a house in La Jolla and a house in Barcelona. I mean, there are a lot of people like that as well. But is it really a lot? Well, it's only less than 1%. And here, according to this, a housing unit was determined to be unoccupied if the utility usage for a particular month fell below 3 standard deviations of the unit's respective 60-month average. Because, they're still paying SDG&E, but probably a really low rate because they're not running the lights, they're not running the air conditioning. They're probably just kind of paying that connection fee and maybe a little bit. They got to pay water, right, for utilities, but just mostly the base rate because no one's in there. And that's an interesting way to analyze it. So they know that all the utilities work and no one's really using them. But how many units are we talking about here? Well, less than 1%, which means that according to this study in San Diego, between 1,500 and 3,700 units could reasonably be considered potentially vacant for 6 months or more in the city of San Diego in the period between 2015 and 2019. And you might be thinking 1,500, 3,700 units, that's a lot. That's a lot of vacant property. Boy, if we could move the homeless into there, we might get the people off the street in the Gaslamp Quarter in East Village. Or we could get a lot of young 20-somethings in there that are struggling to find a place to live. Or there's a lot of renters that are dying to find places. There's low vacancy. Look at these places. They're just sitting there empty. But you know what? Even if you did that, it would be only a tiny, tiny dent in the size of the overall problem. Because, friends, we have a housing deficit in San Diego County, or in the city of San Diego, of over 100,000 units. So if you were able to free up 1,700 to 35, yeah, that might make a little difference. But it's not going to be this groundbreaking change. I mean, really, you kind of look at some of these reports from the San Diego Housing Commission and from other sources. According to this, the San Diego Housing Federation, an industry group for low-income housing developers, they said if you look back more than 2 decades, the built-up deficit is closer to 140,000 homes in San Diego. Holy moly. Yeah, because they haven't been building. Since the boom in the 90s. And then, after the recession, everything really kind of shifted, the Great Recession. But meanwhile, people still keep moving to San Diego. And according to this article, in this article, by the way, I'll include links in the show notes. This is in the Voice of San Diego. It says, the idea that we've underbuilt our needs can be an unsatisfying explanation for the crushing costs of housing in San Diego. After all, a view of downtown reveals cranes from East Village to Little Italy, each hovering over a hole in the ground that will soon be a home or yet another condo tower. And we're seeing that here in Poway, all this construction on Poway Road, on Espola with the farm. There's a lot going on here. But it makes you wonder, is this going to help? And it will help. It puts a small dent in it. But this is better, I think, if you're going to build more homes. I mean, because if other people have vacant property, a brand spanking condo there on La Jolla Shores or what have you, that's only used 4 months a year and the other 8 months it's empty. I mean, what do you plan to do there? I mean, you want to tax them more to get them to use it more? Or, maybe that will actually, you have them do Airbnb more. Is that what you want? Or do some people think the government needs to seize their land and prevent them from having it vacant so they can give it to someone else? Well, that's like anti-American on its face. This is a land of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Taking people's property and handing it over to someone else, that's not liberty. Certainly not the pursuit of the happiness for the guy that had his property taken away from him. So building more is better. Building more increases our volume. Building more can happen quickly. And these other cases of homes that are vacant is less than 1% overall. And you know what? It's financially disadvantageous to have a home vacant for that period of time because people want to monetize their asset. They want to rent it out. They want an income stream from it because the property tax for whatever it is, that ain't cheap. Even with property tax rates of around 1% or so, a lot of the, it's probably a little more when you add on all the ancillary bonds at the local level. Well, I mean, we're still talking 10 grand a month or more for a lot of these units. In some cases, a lot more if it's like a single family home that it's empty. I mean, the only people that can really afford to do that are the uber rich, and those are just a very tiny exception of this. Now, governments in San Diego issue permits for roughly 25,000 new homes per year through the 1970s and 1980s. San Diego was a booming period of growth at that time, and developers filled suburban areas like Mira Mesa and Scripps Ranch and Rancho Penasquitos and Carmel Valley. And they did. But then it kind of slowed down. In some cases, stopped. And now more people moving in. We have a lot more high-tech jobs, high-paying jobs, biotech jobs, and now people can't find a place to live. And according to this article, the lack of new home building has a direct result on housing prices. It just might take some time for the results to materialize, and that's true. That's because new homes, like new cars, new sneakers, new computers, are expensive. But like those other items, housing gets less desirable and therefore less expensive as it ages. Market rate housing constructed now will therefore add to the community stock of lower cost housing in the future as these homes age and become more affordable. That's true. I mean, look at the homes that were built in Mira Mesa in the 1980s. They're older homes now, and they're not as attractive of a purchase opportunity as a lot of these newer homes and newer communities. So, relatively speaking, they cost less. But also, as more people move into these brand spanking new places, they're going to be vacating older places that cost less, that rent for less. And I think that's good. But they were building 25,000 units a year. 35 years ago, that's what they were doing. And they're not keeping up. They're nowhere near that. I think they're only building like 10,000 a year now in San Diego. It's no wonder they're falling behind. The region keeps adding jobs and people, and even as it produces fewer places for those people to sleep at night. So the NIMBYs in these communities, not in my backyard, they've been preventing development for so long, they're finally losing. And I think that's good because we need more housing in San Diego County. And now we're finally starting to get more of it. And all these innovative ways that people are doing it, like these micro units that are being built around a chicken pie restaurant in North Park, smaller units that are more focused on urban living, walkable living, biking, mass transit. That's good, especially when you gotta get into San Diego City proper. But even here in the suburbs of Poway, a lot of that's changing too. It would be great if everyone had a ranch style house on a 1 acre or 2 acre lot with a big open yard for their children to play. I mean, that's the American dream, right? But when it's in America's finest city where there's such huge demand and so many high-tech jobs with people making good money that are willing to pay more, well, that idea starts to fit less and less. And if you really want that kind of a property, it's going to cost more. It just is. And that's just the nature of how all of this is progressing. Now, if you still want the white picket fence, maybe people need to consider other places in America to live. And there are a lot of Californians that are doing that have said, I've had it up to here with California. I don't like the high prices, the regulations, and I want to go somewhere where it's a better place for my children to be raised. Okay, then fine. And perhaps that's what people do. But to try to impose your will on the rest of California and say, I want it to stay the way that I like it, I mean, it's just wrong. It's just morally wrong. And if we're going to incentivize more people to come here to San Diego to participate in our economy and provide highly productive jobs in the tech sector, biotech, and other parts of our economy, we need more places for people to live. Is Poway going to turn into New York City? No. Is San Diego going to turn into New York City? No. But San Diego might become more and more like Vancouver. San Diego, parts of it might become more and more like downtown San Francisco. Well, maybe not downtown San Francisco, but other neighborhoods of the city of San Francisco, where you're going to see more high density living. And I think that's just a natural evolution. I mean, what do you think? Tell me. Type it into the live stream in the live chat on Facebook or on YouTube, and we'll get you involved. There's also the Senate bill, number 10. This is an interesting one too. They said the median cost for a San Diego County home, $835,000. Assuming a buyer could come up with $167,000 for a 20% down payment, that leaves a mortgage of $668,000 with interest rates averaging 7% of late. For a 30-year loan, the monthly payment would be gulp $4,994 a month. That's a lot. But you know what? I think there's also kind of a disconnect that I think some older people have with pricing, and I have it all the time. Because sometimes my brain still thinks that it's 1994. And then I'll go see like what the price of a carne asada burrito is. And I'll go, holy moly. I remember I used to go to lunch for less than $5 and get a burrito and a drink. And now it costs 15. Things have changed. And for some of us, it's hard to kind of get our arms around it. It's kind of like my grandfather used to always say, I go to the movies and see a double feature for 2 bits, which was 25 cents. Things change. Things become more expensive. Compensation's increasing. Are they increasing proportionally? That's a whole other conversation and argument there. But San Diego needs more homes, friends. And the more we resist it, the more difficult it's going to get.